MMA Now, powered by Film On TV Network.
I'm David Kano with MMA Now. Right now we're in Santa Monica, California. Beautiful California with Dr. AnnMaria De Mars. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
We have this in the middle, this barricade, but that's just because it's a cool office.
Mm-hmm. It's to protect me from you.
Well,
in case you leap over the desk, I have advanced preparation.
And get thrown by a world champion judoka over
through the window, down the 12th floor.
12 stories. Well, welcome. We're so happy that you're able to come on with your time. Let's get right into 7 Generation Games. This is something I don't think a lot of people know about you. They know a lot of stuff about you, but not about 7 Generation Games. Can you talk about what it is and how it helps children out and what's new and innovative that you're doing with it?
Yeah, I'm kind of the outlier when it comes to people who win world championships in martial arts. They're going to selling mats and running schools. And I said, I'll get a PhD and specialize in applied statistics and psychometrics. And then I looked at what could you really do to make a difference in the world? Because, you only get one life. And so many tech companies are doing things like, how to get the best valet parking in San Francisco. And really, who needs that? I mean, who really needs that? What we really need is if you look at the number of people you knew that maybe you grew up with, and I'm sure you were a smart guy, but you probably had friends that were pretty smart too, and they at some point decided school was not for them. And they often ran into a wall with math. There was something they didn't get, and because math is cumulative, the next step they didn't get it, and then eventually they decide, you know what, school sucks, I'm going to quit. And they're way over here and you're here. And at some point, if somebody could have intervened in that trajectory when you didn't understand fractions and explain it to you personally so you got it, then you would think, maybe school's not so bad. My mom really wants me to graduate. And maybe you would have stuck it out and maybe even gone to college. That would have changed your whole life. And that would have changed your kids' lives because your kids would then grow up in a better environment. And that's where the name of the company came from, 7 Generation Games. We were actually spun off from a company co-founded on the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation. And one of the things that the Dakota and a lot of other tribes believe is that you should look 7 generations forward in how your actions have an impact. So not just on what brings you the most money next quarter, but how is what you're doing going to impact your children and their children and so on. That's like the Dakota Pipeline. I'm sure you're familiar with that whole protest going on right now in North Dakota and South Dakota. And that's the same group, the Sioux. And their belief is that no matter how much money you make, it's not okay to poison the water for your children. So 7 generations came from the idea of doing something that will have a lasting impact. And I figured I'm good at math. I'm good at programming. This is something I can do that would make the world a better place.
But what do you tell someone, there's those students that, like you said, that they're not good at math. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at science. I just did enough to get by in those topics. I've actually looked at some of your simulations online, and it reminded me of an Oregon Trail that has some academia along with it. Is that, and on steroids as well, because the graphics. Yeah,
the graphics, things you can do now are so different.
Right, exactly. How would you describe that?
I think that's a good example of people say, well, if Oregon Trail, you had learned math, and not just that it sucks when your whole family dies of dysentery, or if some people call it grand theft horses, because you're in this virtual world, and at the very end of Spirit Lake, you could steal a horse, which was something that the Sioux did a lot. And that was a way that you could earn eagle feathers and show bravery. So I would say that math is like anything. You do more of it, you practice more, you get better. You say you're not very good at math. Well, at one point in your life, you weren't very good at walking. I mean, you go home and you ask your mom and she'll say, you tripped, you fell down, you cried, you fell in your little diaper, but you walked right in here and you didn't think about it. If it's same as any sport you do, whether it's soccer or judo or anything, when you start, you go and you look at the Pee-wee class in judo or the little Pop Warner football league or anything. And oh my God, they're terrible, But you follow those same kids for a while and they're really good. All it takes is sticking it out. And people stick things out if they're having a good time at it, if they're fun. Or they stick it out because there's a reward. And I looked at, say, my youngest daughter, who she really didn't want to do Algebra 2. And I said, if you get an A in it, I will buy you an iPhone 5, which she had no need for, but I wanted her to get an A in Algebra 2. And she did. And did she develop a deep and intrinsic love of math? Probably not, but she managed to, do fairly well in calculus at the end of her senior year. So you could develop games to do the same thing that parents and effective teachers do. You figure out where the student's having a problem. You kind of program in that artificial intelligence. So one of the things that we did that was really fun is we looked at really, really good teachers and said, what did those teachers do? And how could we program that? So for example, if you're playing a game and it comes up and it says, you're just a little boy, you can only hit a wolf about every 5 times. You're being attacked by these wolves with rabies. How many arrows do you need if there's 7 wolves? And so if you put 12, the computer will pop up and say, are you maybe adding instead of subtracting? So that's what good teachers do, whether they're parents, they're parents or they're actually teachers, they give you a hint. So you can in the game ask for a hint, or if it can detect what your error was, it will give you a hint. Now if you put 4,082, you're just not trying, and they'll just say that's wrong. Then also the things that make people learn to hang, in judo and some sports it's belts, right? You want to get to that next belt. In a lot of games you want to get to the next level. So I've seen classrooms where teachers will say, boys and girls, how many of you are at level 3 in Spirit Lake? Well, you're never going to get there unless you can do your times tables up to 12 by 12. And is that developing a deep and intrinsic love of math? Well, no, it's rewarding them for learning something. And some people think that's not good, but you know what? My husband one day, he came home from work, and he had a fairly good job at a defense contractor, and my niece, who was living with us at the time, said, how was work, Uncle Dennis? And Dennis said, work sucked. That's why they had to pay me to show up. But that's how it is in life a lot of times, right? If you reinforce people for something, they will do it, and then maybe they'll get so good at it that they really like it.
Well, let me follow up on that. Why do you think other countries like Russia and some Asian countries, they're so much more proficient than math than Americans? And from my own experience, as far as taking math, I can remember middle school where I was able to get to the answer not using the formula. And out here it was, you need to use this formula to get to this answer. There's only one way to it. And I would find ways to get to an answer, and I got the right answer. And I don't know how I did it a different method, and they would say, well, you got the right answer, but you didn't do it the right way, so we're marking you off. And that discouraged me. Why do you think that is?
See, I think that that's an example of bad teaching because I think math is like judo in some ways. There's more than one way to your objective. And if you got the right answer, like I always tell my kids when I'm coaching judo, if the referee goes like this at the end of the match and you're on that side and his hand's over to you and you won, you did it right. So it's the same thing. If the answer is, 49 and you got 49, as long as you didn't get it by copying off the kid next to you, whether you said that's 7 squared or you added up 7 times or whatever you did, right, it's all good.
And what about the other countries? Why do you think other countries they're better in math than students out here?
Well, I would, first of all, question how much better they actually are. I think sometimes that's a matter of the people who are tested. So in our country, everybody goes to school and everybody gets tested in those grades. And I think in some of those other countries, I'm really skeptical that it's our average kid being compared to their average kid as opposed to the kids who are the poorest and with the least resources maybe just don't go to school at all or are not involved in the testing. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is what I see with a lot of American kids, and I've taught a lot of students from different countries that came over here as undergraduates and graduate school. Kids in the U.S. tend more to major in, study, focus on things they're interested in, where in a lot of other countries, they don't have that luxury, and it is a luxury. When you meet a student here who's majoring in computer science or math or physics, often it's because they're very interested in that. I've met a lot of students that come from Asia or India, and they're majoring in engineering or statistics or math because that's what will get them a job and bring their family over here and change everybody's life. And I don't fault them for that at all. I mean, they have my great respect. But I think in the U.S., we have the luxury of not having to do that. So our kids don't have to be as good at math because they're already living in a pretty good situation.
Yeah, for instance, at my school, our valedictorian was from Russia originally, and the runner-up was from India. And if you look, I look at the spelling bees, they're becoming more of either they're not from here originally or first generation, Indian or Russian or something of that nature. And that surprises me, a spelling bee. How are they outspelling Americans that first language is English?
Well, maybe because those American kids don't see a lot of value in being able to spell every word in the English language. And also, those are things that you can memorize. And again, all of those things will help you get a leg up, maybe help you get into a good college. What I've always said about American kids versus the international students that I've seen is often American students in math, computer science, other sciences, it's kind of like that poem about the little girl that had the little curl right in the middle of her forehead. And when she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. So kids who aren't interested in math just don't bother very often. So what we're trying to do is make games that will get them interested. The kids who are interested, though, because they're doing it out of genuine intrinsic interest, they will chase that down the rabbit hole. Like, we've got some great software developers in our company. Every single bit of code is written right here in this building. So all of our software developers are from the U.S., and our team is predominantly Latino, which was not deliberate, but, it was people we knew. And when you're looking for somebody, you ask your friends, we're looking for a new developer, or you ask the current staff. And since, a lot of our current staff are Latino, that was their friends. So we recruited one of our developers at East LA College. Now he's, gone on to, is finishing his bachelor's degree. And when we were looking for somebody, he had a friend that he recommended who was also a computer science major. So I think in this country we do have, if you look at somebody like Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, these are people, Bill Gates, they're all American. So when we're good at something and we're genuinely interested, we're really, really good at it. And if we're not interested, then, screw it, which is kind of an American attitude. I'm not wholly against that attitude.
Is that in a way saying that there's a lot of Americans that are lazy, there's like students, and there's a small percentage of Americans that are really good at what they do because they actually care?
I wouldn't say lazy is the right word. They're not motivated because they don't see any point in it, maybe. And often things are not very well taught. The other thing is we don't give our students nearly enough resources. If you go into a lot of the classrooms in a lot of inner city schools, their technology is so outdated. The support they get is so bad. So you don't give kids books, you give kids computers that are 7 years old, which is like an eon in technology time. And then you say, well, how come you're not doing better? That kid over in China is studying by candlelight and he's doing well. Well, I don't know if he is or he isn't, but it still doesn't change the fact that our kids don't have very good technology. There are often too many of them in a class. So most people that live in middle-class homes, their kids come home, they sit down with their homework, they make sure their child does it, they go over problem by problem, because most teachers don't correct it because they don't have time. If you're a middle school teacher, say, and you've got 150 kids, you can't correct even 10 problems from each kid every night. It's 1,500 problems, right? So you have middle-class kids that go home, their parents go over it. You have other kids that nobody goes over it. They don't know if they're getting it right or wrong. So that's why we did these games. Every problem, it tells you if you got it right or wrong. We'll give you a hint. So,
well, like the fact that, it makes you go back and get the answer right before you move forward. And then it conditions someone to, understand why is it that this is the correct answer. And that's what I liked about this. I only saw a little bit of the canoe, and then there's one where the guy kind of jumping around. But where does the number 7 come from in 7 generation?
The 7 generations we look 7 generations forward and how you're going to have an impact, and you look 7 generations back and how you got to where you are now. I was just, because like I said, we were co-founded on an American Indian reservation, Spirit Lake Consulting, which we grew out of. And I was just at a meeting in North Dakota where this woman from the Ojibwe talked about how Native Americans have the highest rate of military participation of any ethnic group. And she said, did you ever think about that? And she said, because we have this history of coming from a warrior culture. So it comes to the idea you should understand your history. You should look at the past and look at the future, and not just what can I get right now. I know your show's called MMA now. Sorry.
What? Well, you actually sent me down a rabbit hole when I saw that you worked with the Spirit Lake tribe since 1990, and I did some research on Spirit Lake because my mom, she's part Native American. She would spend some summers at the Zio Pueblo reservation. So I like wondering what was Spirit Lake, and then Dakotas from the Sioux. And what popped up was a documentary on PBS Frontline, a 5-hour documentary, which I watched the whole thing, on Robin Carbonell.
Oh my God, Robin Poor Bear.
And so what I was reading, and then also from the documentary, was there's a big problem on that reservation with sexual abuse and alcoholism. Is when you were there, I know you helped on the education sector. What did you find when you were there, and did you know her as well?
Yes, I did. She just passed away very
2015.
recently. Yeah.
Can you and I was reading reports that she committed suicide. Is that correct?
Yes, she did. Yeah, I actually worked with her, and I'd seen her maybe a few months before that, so I was just very shocked.
Can you talk first about
it?
Did you see abuse like when you were there?
I didn't see the kind of abuse that was talked about in that documentary personally, but yes, I know a lot of people and a lot of families who either their children were affected by abuse, or they were foster parents for children, or they, I have a few friends that are grandparents raising their grandchildren. One of the things they said is, I'm not going to take a chance. I'm older. Yes, it's tough to be raising a preschooler or a grade school kid when you're in your 60s or 70s, but I'm going to take care of my child and not take a chance on them going into social services. There is a high rate of alcoholism. There's a high rate of drug abuse. And I think it's true. Well, I know it's true on most reservations, and it's true in a lot of low-income communities.
Is that the reason why for some? Because watching the documentary, I was just flabbergasted. I asked my mom, "Did you see any of this go on when you were there? 30 years ago, or maybe 40 years ago?" And she said, she was there very briefly, summers and always supervised. But the documentary was very heartbreaking for me, and knowing that she passed away and the depression and all this. So you knew her personally.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, the name of the documentary is, I forgot, if you look up Robin Charbonneau or Robin Poor Bear, as she went by now. And so you had a relationship with her.
Yeah, I just worked with her. I was working, one of the things that another company that I founded, the Julie Group, does is evaluation of federally funded programs. So she was working in a program that I was coming out to do an evaluation for. And it was actually, they were doing a really good job, and she was doing a really good job, and a really nice person. And I was pretty shocked to hear that she had passed away not long after that.
Is that on? It seemed like she wanted to work and she was smart, that she just couldn't find steady work that was able to pay and the bills to support her children. And is that something that's a problem on the reservation?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that's one of the reasons that our original company, Spirit Lake Consulting, got started. Is my two partners were both from the Spirit Lake Nation, and one of them said, we need to establish a company here so that we can pay people, because there's not enough good jobs on this reservation, and people don't have enough training, and I don't want my kids and grandkids to have to leave the reservation to work. I don't want to have to choose between a good job and living with their family and learning their culture. And so that's the last company I founded, kind of the impetus for that. And I think one of the great opportunities for people now with technology and telecommuting is if you can become a good graphic artist, if you become a good software developer, you can live anywhere. You can live on the reservation. You can live in the Central Valley, California, and you can still, have a good job. So we're trying to reach out in those communities and give people an opportunity.
Kind-Hearted Woman, that's the name of the documentary. Are the kids doing okay? Do you know if her kids...
I don't know. I do know that there's a GoFundMe account that they started it's kind of a, what do you call it, a safe house? Is that the word for it? For victims of domestic violence on the reservation. So they're taking donations for that. I think not very long ago, they had the first family move into it.
Do you still work with the tribe now?
Yes. Yeah, I just got back from there Saturday.
How is it now? Is it the same as it has been? in 1990, or has it changed over the years?
One thing that's been a big change is when I started working in the reservation back in 1990, I could probably name you every person on the reservation that had a college degree. And now there are hundreds of people. So I think the tribal college has had a big impact. Having a tribal college there that people don't have to move away for. So I think there's more people getting an education. So I think that's been a real positive change.
And I was segueing to your grandfather, Dr. Alfred Waddell, or is it Waddell?
Yes,
Waddell. Yeah. And that story, and I actually traced some of the lineage back. You did not get to meet him because he passed before you came, but you did meet your grandmother.
Oh, yeah, I still live with my grandma.
So you live with your grandma?
Yes, I'm actually named AnnMaria after her, and her name was Amelia Maria, and my granddaughter is named Amelia after her, which to me, that's kind of, when you talk about generations, you know, people act like, oh, if I could be famous or win these titles, you know, that I'm a success. But I mean, here's a woman who was born in 1900. You know, she died at almost 99 years of age. And there's people, you know, fast forward 100 years after she was born, still being named after her. You know, that's where you've had an impact in the world. You know, she wasn't mega famous or anything like that, but she, you know, let me live with her, and I wasn't that good of a kid at all. And, you know, she was a great example for me, and probably any good that I have, I got from her, pretty much.
And how was that? I mean, they were from Trinidad originally, went to Canada, and faced a lot of racism, because we would have never known that your lineage had, you know, the Afro-Caribbean or his Latin Caribbean in there. I mean, what do people usually take you as, and is that something that you embrace, that culture?
Well, when I was growing up, especially when we would live in places, say in the Midwest or the South, everybody figured you had to be half black and half white because, you know, there weren't a lot of Hispanics. So, yeah, we just got in a lot of random fights. So it probably was good practice for judo. Maria, my oldest daughter, says, yeah, I lived in LA where people thought I was Mexican. Then I moved to New York where people thought I was Puerto Rican. The only thing left is for me to move to Miami where people think I'm, you know, Cuban. But, I think for me, there were a lot of things that my grandmother tried to pass on. And, you know, she spoke Spanish, and always when we were kids, you know, the adults would start speaking in Spanish when they didn't want us to understand. So, of course, that is the biggest motivator for learning a language ever. And she had a lot of, you know, what they call dichos, sayings, that she really, truly believed, that she would tell me all the time that, you know, a poor man's word is the most prized possession. It doesn't matter how rich you are. If you're not honest, that it just doesn't matter.
Can you say it a little bit slower? A poor man's
word is his most prized possession. And I think that's something that we don't always value in America. Mm. If you're really rich, it doesn't matter how you got there. And she totally did not believe that. Yeah, there were a lot of sayings that she had about pobre pero honesto, that somebody's poor but honest. And she drilled in my head that that is an important thing. And I tried to do that with my kids. You know, even they're tiny, if they were in kindergarten and they told their friend they were going to come over to their house, and then some other friend said, oh, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese's or the pool. And I would say, no, because you told that person you were going to do that, and you said it, so you have to do it. So I think I gained a lot of things from her.
So your ethnicity is half Trinidadian and half Caucasian?
Yes. And actually, my grandparents, both of their moms were from Venezuela, from Caracas, which is how they met. Because, you know, it's only about 30 miles across the sea. Mm. And so, I said, well, how did you ever meet? She said, well, my people from Caracas and his people were from Caracas. And so they introduced them, and there you go. And yeah, they got married and hopped on a boat and came to the U.S. And that's the other thing. I mean, how could you do that? You know, you're living on a little island that you've never left, and then you get on a boat and you land in New York City. I mean, that just takes some serious huevos, no?
A lot. Another thing on your family lineage is your tree. It goes back pretty far. How was that something you put together, or was the ancestry tree be able to be put together?
I have no idea. I had nothing to do with it. I think one of my cousins who has no kids and you know, when you have no children, you have a lot of time. Yeah, because I remember somebody contacting me, and she said my grandfather was one of like 10 kids, and I think he was her dad's brother or something. So yeah, one of the relatives put it together. I don't.
And you were born in the Air Force Base, right?
Yep.
So your parents were Air Force, or your
My dad was in the Air Force. Yep.
Okay. Now there's so much to get forward. Let's just cover a couple more topics before we get into some MMA stuff. Is what are you most proud of? I mean, you have your 7 Generation Games, you have the Julia Group, you were on Forbes top 40 over 40. You just made the top 50 new startups. I mean, what are you most proud of? What you've done? You won a world championship in 1984 in judo, a gold medal. Would that be the top of your list?
No, I think the top of my list would be I have 4 children who are good people. You know, Warren Buffett said that if you fail as a father, no matter what your other success is, you're a failure. And I would say the same thing goes for a mother. So no, I would say the thing I'm proudest of is my kids are good people. And sometimes people mention Rhonda and say, you must be so proud of her. And I always say, I'm proud of all of my children. And it's true. Like Jennifer, teaches school. And she said one time, I'm the least accomplished person in the family. Maria wrote a New York Times bestseller, and Rhonda's, in the UFC, and, Julia's, senior class president and going off to play soccer. And I said, that's not in any way true. When people talk about who made a difference in their life, almost anybody, they can remember either the best teacher they ever had or the worst teacher they ever had. They could be 50 and they'll be like, yeah, Mrs. Anderson, she told me I could be a writer. So all of them are amazing, good people in their own way. And I think, it's been a tough road. I mean, my husband passed away when the girls were little, and for a while it was just me and them. And there were a lot of times when I wanted to skin them all alive and tack their hides beside the wall, and we made it through. So I think that's the proudest thing.
Now, you have a podcast called More Than Ordinary. One of your daughters is your co-host. And something I listened to a few of your podcasts, something that's interesting to me in my mind, which I wanted to ask, which I'm going to ask you right now, is everyone more than ordinary, or only certain people more than ordinary?
I think everyone can be more than ordinary. There was the Armed Forces Vocational Assessment Battery is as you might guess, a whole bunch of tests that they give people when they are entering the military. And what they found is 90% of the people were in the top 10% on something. So you might be like the top 10% in marksmanship, or the top 10% in math, or the top 10% in interpersonal skills. So I think everybody can be more than ordinary. It's just a matter of finding what it is that drives you and then putting in the work.
Now, in one of those podcasts, you talked about doing push-ups, about your arms, and that you want to get in better shape. So you started with 10 push-ups each morning, and then you worked your way to 30. Are you still doing your push-ups? I see your hand.
Well, no, because I just had surgery on my hand, so now I'm doing sit-ups.
How many push-ups did you get up to?
No, I just did 30 every day, because and that was my point, is you don't have to be outstanding at everything. That when I was competing, I would get up and I would do 50 every morning, and then I would go and I would run sprints, and I would lift weights, and I would do all these other things. But now I'm not trying to set the world record for push-ups. I just want to be not able to, pick up boxes or whatever. So that's the other thing about being more than ordinary, is maybe you figure at some things you don't have to be outstanding, and at other things, that's where you focus your energies.
You also talked about being in juvenile hall as a child, or juvenile teen. Can you talk about your experience, and how was juvenile hall when you were there?
Juvenile hall sucked. Are you kidding? They lock you up. It is, it totally blows. And I got in so many fights with everybody, with the other kids, with the staff. I got handcuffed to beds because I was just always fighting. I totally sucked. And I mention it in part because I teach judo down in Watts, South LA, in Gompers Middle School. And I just came back from a boarding school on a reservation. I hear all the time from teachers, oh, yes, Dr. De Mars, your games wouldn't work for these kids, or these kids are so bad. And I just tell them, you just have no idea. Believe me, any of the stories these kids have, I could top. And it's important for people to realize no matter where you are, you can get out. It may not be easy and it may not be fast, but you can get out. You may be in juvenile hall now, but you never know. 5 years from now, you may have a college degree. I mean, It's probably less than 5 years from the last time I was in juvenile hall till I graduated from college.
And how had you been training judo when you went to juvenile hall at the time?
Yes, so I'm sure the staff did not appreciate that. Yes, I'd been in judo a couple of years, not very long. And I think judo was probably one of the best things for me because I was an angry little person. And I think for many kids, if you just want to beat somebody up, here's an approved venue in which to do it. And that was another thing that changed the trajectory of my life, right? So I'm getting in fights, and they're throwing me in juvenile hall and kicking me out of school, and then I'm in judo, and I go and I beat somebody up, and they're like, here, have a medal. Would you like to go to France? I was like, yeah, this is the thing for me.
Why were you an angry person?
I had my reasons. I'm just going to leave it at that. I had my reasons. I left home for good at 15. Got a fake ID and got a job, and here I am.
I asked Pauline Macias, this training partner of Ronda's, I said, what's the limit of, she's at a high-level black belt as well. She trained at the training center,
yeah, sure.
as you know. What's the biggest weight that you can throw someone? Is it 300 pounds too much for you? Is 320? And she said, I can take anyone down. It doesn't matter what weight it is. I can sweep them. I can throw them. And she started grabbing me a little bit, and I can feel, I can go for a ride at any moment in time. What is it about judo that it doesn't matter what size you are, you'll be able to take someone down?
Well, I think it's kind of a misunderstanding. Say it doesn't matter what size you are. So if we're both equally skilled and you're 3 times my size, then you're going to win. If
I know
judo and
right,
you don't.
Correct.
Well, the analogy I always give is if you'd ever been drunk, not you personally, but say you watched it on TV, somebody who's drunk and comes staggering through a room and trips over a chair and falls down. Now, the chair wasn't smarter than them. It wasn't faster than them. It wasn't stronger than them. It was in the right place at the right time for them to fall. So that's basically what you do. If a person's moving backwards, you just kind of help them move backwards a little bit further. If they're pushing at a certain height, and if you drop down, they're pushing and they fall over. So part of it is the idea of using people's own strength and momentum against them. When I started competing, there were no weight divisions, and I weighed 103 pounds. And I almost always won. And I, one year, won the AmCan, which was obviously a tournament with America and with the U.S. and Canada, in the 106 pound and under division and in the open division. So by then had 8 weight divisions. Yeah, and the person that I fought in the finals was probably way over 200 pounds. And I threw her. So you can do it. It is. I think it's ill-advised, frankly, to give up too much weight. And that's why I'm all banged up at this age, because I did it. And I would never back down from a fight. And that's not always the wisest thing, because even if you're really skilled, if you twist the wrong way and somebody 300 pounds falls on your knee, it's a little tough.
And when you teach, do you still demonstrate by throwing?
Oh, yeah.
So you could still throw someone right now, no problem. You could throw a 200-pound videographer editor.
Yes.
Pauline wouldn't do it, but that's something that...
It'd be a little tough with one hand, but I could still do it. I know a few things. Totally could do it.
You could go. I think you're more prone to do it than others. Let's talk a little bit of MMA now. One of your daughters, one of your 4, as you've talked about, is Ronda Rousey. You've been in the news as well, TMZ, different interviews. Can you just talk about her mind state right now as it lies?
Well, I think she's a good kid. I mean,
her mind state.
It's probably a bad idea to ask somebody's mom, because I always think Ronda's perfect. I mean, I'm sure if you asked your mom, she thinks.
No, how is she doing as far as like is she doing okay?
Yeah,
she's
doing okay.
Because from the last fight, that was almost a year ago. There was a lot of backlash, and we talked off air. A lot of articles written negatively, which it seemed like the whole press turned it. And I wrote an op-ed saying she'll come back. She's a fighter, and I didn't understand why that backlash came.
Well, my theory on it is that often people are angry and don't really like people who break barriers, because that's been their excuse, right? Like, well, I could have been a fighter, except that, they wouldn't let women do it, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be that specific thing. It'd be something else in their life. Well, I could have been sales manager, but they wouldn't let me do it. And then you see these other people who go and break those barriers, and then it makes you feel like, well, actually, maybe that was just an excuse. And I don't understand people that have to go down and tear down someone they don't even know, or even people they do know. And I always say this, even if you could make someone else less, it doesn't make you more. So I think I do. I think where a lot of that comes from is people who are not that successful themselves, don't feel that good about themselves, and they feel like these other people make them feel less. And you know what? That's not their problem. That's your problem. Well, not you personally.
Right. Now, was there anything, I wasn't there for that fight. I've been to a few of her fights. It seemed she wasn't the same, and I knew some things behind the scenes, like Judo Jean LaBelle, who's been a big part of her. He wasn't able to make it out, and I believe you weren't able.
I didn't go. No.
You weren't able to make it out, and mentally, I mean, from looking at her, it looked like maybe she wasn't all focused and dialed in. Was that something that you felt as well watching it, or did you even watch the fight?
No, I have to work. I actually run a company. So, it's always funny because people ask stuff like that. It's like, well, actually being Ronda's mom is not my real job. So
Okay.
no.
So you don't know if there was any outlying factors that may have went into that?
I mean, I could speculate, but it would just be pure speculation. So,
Now she's coming off, I guess, arthroscopic surgery.
Yeah.
And is slated, originally was supposed to come back possibly in winter, but now it's looking like maybe to the end of the year or even next year. Can you talk about that?
Well, she had knee surgery. I didn't know that we were going to tell everybody about it, but then since Dana White tweeted it out,
Right.
I guess it's a big secret.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's always tough because, yeah, I mean, it's arthroscopic surgery, but still, you're having surgery and you have to, it's not like she's a rower. You have to use your knees. You have to be able to stand up. And so it's not like you could just bounce back. It's different if you're actually competing than if you're, say, going back to a desk job. So, yeah, she's had a couple of surgeries to clean things up that I thought she should have had really a long time ago.
So are you thinking like December or even 2017?
I don't know. I do know that, like I said, she was fighting for a long time with those injuries, and then they would keep scheduling another fight, and I got so mad at her because it's like, you only get you're not going to get another body. If you break this one all up, no matter how much money they give you, you can't be like, oh, and I'll take that model over there.
Now, as a mom, but also as a fighter yourself, would you rather have her just stick with doing movies and commercials and shows rather than fighting, or is there that side of you that likes to see, your child go out there and compete and be one of the best in the world?
No, I would like her to go and do whatever she wants to do. Because, yeah, there are things, I mean, I always thought that she would go on to graduate school. She was super good in school. She was super smart, super good in math and science. And so that's what, when she was young, we always figured she would, have a PhD in oceanography by now. But, yeah, whatever she wants to do that makes her happy.
Now, you said Dana was he not supposed to tweet that out about her knee surgery, or was that?
Well, no, I just personally, I never mentioned anything like that. So, no, I don't care one way or the other. I don't tell anybody if she'd had surgery or anything like that. So I was surprised to see it. And I was like, oh, guess not a secret.
Do you watch any MMA fights, UFC, Bellator fights right now?
I watch them if they're Ronda's friends. So like the Diaz brothers, I would watch them. Manny Gambarian, I would watch him.
So did you watch Diaz McGregor too? That was just...
I saw a little bit of it. I was traveling then too.
Okay.
I'm always gone.
Right. From what you saw, so you didn't get to watch the whole fight?
No.
Because there was some controversy of who won that fight.
Well, see, I only saw the end part of it, and I thought Nick did really well.
Oh, Nate.
I thought Nate did really well, but then people said, well, he didn't do as well at the beginning. So the part I saw, he did really well.
Yeah, there was like a couple of knockdowns, but then it was like who ended up on top and who did more damage. So should scoring be scored a little bit differently in MMA? Should there be a change? I even think there should be 2 more rounds added on to the end of them. What is your thoughts on the first stage?
I think that's completely wrong. I don't think there should be more rounds. I think looking at somebody who's competed for a long time and is now older and has all the, beaten up parts to show for it, I think people often don't realize how much damage people are doing to their bodies. So no, I definitely don't think there ought to be more.
Are you surprised at how fast MMA has grown, and it's due in fact to the Knicks and the Rondas and the Conor McGregors of MMA?
Yeah, I actually really am surprised how fast it's grown.
And not only that, but judo as well. I mean, because of whoever trains in a certain discipline, BJJ, that became, everyone wanted to take that. And when Ronda came along, judo, have you seen that in that as well? Like, more people are interested and they want to know what judo is and they want to take it and try it out?
Maybe there's more interest, but I haven't seen a whole huge growth in judo, in part because there aren't that many judo instructors. So if you want to take judo and there's nobody who teaches judo in your town, the fact that you have an interest in it isn't going to help at all. So I was going to say I would like to see more professional judo schools, but to be honest, I don't even know if I would. I mean, I don't care one way or the other, and this is going to sound a really terrible thing to say, but I mean, sports are great, and I competed in judo for 14 years. I, still teach to this day. But I think often people put an overemphasis on them. When if you go and you win some fight, some title, that's good. I mean, good for you. I'm sure it took a lot of work. But it's not like you cured AIDS or solved world hunger. And I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on it. I mean, oh my God, look at people with little kids. And they're just screaming because this 7-year-old didn't win this match. And so, yeah, I think overall we put too much emphasis on sports and maybe not enough emphasis on things where our efforts would have more impact for future generations.
But I would consider, people consider MMA a sport. I personally don't. Judo, I wouldn't consider a sport. I think it's a martial art. Would you say that martial arts it is a martial art, and is that important to know martial arts as far as self-defense? Because I know something you've spoken out is like you're 100% against bullies.
Right.
And knowing judo, that would empower someone to be able to defend themselves.
Right. But so would you say boxing and wrestling, they're not sports either?
I would say that they're martial arts. I think boxing is not a sport. I know we call it, but I think a sport is something, my definition is where you're trying to win a game and score points. And in football, I played football, you can hit each other, but you're not trying to inflict permanent damage or hurt someone. Not to say that they're trying to do that as well in boxing or MMA, but you're trying to knock someone out, you're trying to submit them, you're trying to do damage to take them out so they can't go on any further.
I think there's a great deal of benefit in being able to defend yourself, a great deal. I think maybe that's one of the reasons that I've been very outspoken my whole life, because often people don't speak up because they're afraid. And from a very early age, I realized that what people are afraid of often doesn't happen. And if I was walking down a street, or if somebody decided to take a swing at me, they would be ill-advised to do that, let me say.
Has anyone tested you before on the street?
Oh, yes. I didn't grow up in Santa Monica. Yes.
What do you just throw them and is it over? How do those end?
Well, it depends on how much drugs they're on. I mean, I'm honest to God, man. God, when I was younger, I was fighting somebody and she was just nuts. I mean, I don't know what kind of, I slammed her on the concrete a few times and she kept popping up. Yeah, in fact, finally somebody came by in a car and said, hop in, because I had thrown this woman on the concrete a few times and she just would not give up. And, I didn't want to kill her. I didn't want to we were teenagers and she was an idiot. But yeah, if people are drugged up enough, they don't really feel it. So that's unfortunate. I was in some fights with people who didn't like me and I didn't like them. And sometimes people who had bad intentions. So somebody tried and rape me once. I broke his arm. I had somebody else try and rape me with a gun, and I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it, because he had a gun. And all that stuff you see on TV where they kick the gun out of their hand, that's on TV, and those guns aren't really loaded. So track's a good sport for self-defense, too.
Track?
Yes, because if they have a gun, you should run. And you should run zigzag, too, because most people don't shoot that well. I mean, people out on the street, they're not like the police in there with target practice every day.
You
See, all these useful tips you didn't expect to get from me.
it's just because I've covered so much of or read over of what you've done, and then you just start adding different types of stories that most people don't go through, and I know it's your experiences. I think it helps you. You're able to relate to a much more mass audience than most people would. Do you find that when you talk to people, like you're gonna find a way to be able to connect to somebody?
Well, yeah, because like I said, I didn't grow up in yuppie Santa Monica. And so when I talk to kids, whether they're on a reservation or they're in a boarding school or they're, in the barrio, it's sort of I understand what it's like. I understand what it's like to not have the things that you need, to have people think that you're never going to be successful, that you're going to end up in prison. I know what that's like. But then on the other hand, I did go through and get 2 master's degrees and a PhD. And so if I'm at a software conference, I know exactly what you're talking about when you want to invert a matrix or if you want to solve equations in multidimensional space. So it's just having that broad range of experience. And I think many people end up in a bubble and they just talk to other people like them and they stay in their little neighborhood where they were born, and they can't relate to people outside of that because that's all they know.
Real quick, since the Olympics ended, I know there was a couple of Americans that I think one of them medaled. One of the females
Kayla Harrison got a gold medal. It was her second time. She got a gold medal the last Olympics too.
And from what I was told is judo from Pauline it's highly competitive at the Olympic level, especially not all Americans get to go.
Right.
Is that something that's how the judo scores their system, their rankings, is that the same way it was when you were coming up?
No. When I was competing, I think every country got to enter a full team. Now, let's see. See, here's the thing that's weird. In 1980, the U.S. boycotted the Olympics, and we didn't go because it was in Russia, and there was a big thing about Russia invading Afghanistan. In 1984, the Olympics were in the U.S. Well, how it happens is the host country gets to enter somebody in every division. So if you're an American, you got to go. And then 88, women's judo was a demonstration sport, which meant I think only the top 12 or so in the world got to go compete. So no, women's judo didn't become it was a demonstration sport in the Olympics in 88, and then it was a regular Olympic sport in 92. So when I was competing, the big thing was the World Championships, and there every country could send a person. You could send one person per weight.
And now just rounding off, we can go on for like another 20 hours, but just some quick questions. What's your favorite food?
Jelly beans. I am not one of those big health food people.
Wow, I'm surprised. I thought you were going to be a salad or...
No.
What is your favorite place to eat?
Probably Chinois in Maine and Santa Monica.
What kind of food is that?
Well, Wolfgang Puck owns it. It's kind of French-Chinese fusion. Yeah, it's really good.
Favorite color?
Blue.
If you could go back and change one thing that happened in your life, what is it, and would you change it?
Oh my God, it would be my husband dying. It's really hard to say because, I'm married again, I have another child, and so, yeah, it's really hard to say, but that would definitely be the one thing I would want to change.
Now you can go back in time as well and tell Dr. AnnMarie at 10 years old, 11, 12, one piece of advice. What age would you be, and what would that piece of advice be?
If it was just advice, oh my gosh, I think I would go back to myself in my early 20s when I was just getting started in my career and say, you're not smarter than everybody. I mean, I was just such an insufferable little pain in the ass because I was really smart. I mean, I graduated from college at 19. I, got my master's degree right after that. I worked as an engineer. I could do all this stuff. But just because you're smart, just because you have some good ideas, doesn't mean you have all the ideas. And it doesn't mean everybody else is an idiot. And I think I wasted a lot of time trying to prove I was the smartest person in the room where I should have just shut up and learned from people.
Would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
Well, I think I'd rather be invisible because you can already fly in a plane. It's not that different.
Well, the plane could go down.
Yeah.
You never know. You bet your advice that you've given to every single one of your daughters, like the same piece of advice.
Never, ever, ever, ever give up.
Really?
Yes. No matter what it is, you will get there. And the other thing is, no matter how hard it is, just start. Like Julia was she's playing college soccer now. She's a freshman, so this could be a big leap from high school to college.
What
And
college?
Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So she got the workout from the college coach, and she's looking at it like, oh my gosh. And I said, look, just do it. Even if you can't do every bit of it today, just go out and do it. I think she'd been sick for a couple weeks, so not only had she not been playing soccer, but she'd actually been sick in bed. And so it's just go out and start. And if you can only do a fifth of it today, then tomorrow you'll be able to do 22%. And just start and don't give up, and you'll get there.
Dr. AnnMaria De Mars, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.